whether at the state, at the federal, state, or local level. They represent the interests of public safety and work with law enforcement agencies to bring accused persons to justice. Then what did they do again? These are some of the things that they do, prosecutors do. Once a suspect is arrested, the investigator does his work by investigating the case thoroughly and presenting the case file to the prosecutor. On receipt of the case file, the prosecutor must look at the evidence and decide whether or not to file charges for a case against the suspect, who becomes a defendant eventually. When the prosecutor makes that determination, he files formal paperwork to charge the suspect to. For us, in investigation, you have to look at barriers. What are essentially the barriers to effective investigation? Because what we realize, first of all, sometimes is that the officer investigating the case, first of all, must be aware of the law itself. The officer must be aware of the law itself. The officer must be aware of the elements of the crime. The officer must have been able to attain some degree of competence by way of training and experience and exposure in knowing that these are the things that have to be done, and they have to be done properly. The officer has to be certain too that the victim is protected and given sufficient shelter and assurances. One, to be certain that the victim is best placed to assist when the time comes for the prosecution of the case in court. Then furthermore, the chain of evidence, because when exhibits are recovered in the course of investigation, if you don't pick the evidence properly at the right time from the right spot, or you don't recover them from the right persons or thereabout, and you don't arrange them, proper chain of custody must be maintained, and then you don't do these things well, and you don't take proper records of them, they will have difficulties when they get to court. They will not stand. It's like having a candle standing by another light that will just make it to just sound wobbly or so. So these are some of the things that an investigator must do before the case gets to the prosecutor. It's a bit tedious because what I like to discuss with I have my colleague director. He always tell me, say, Director, all I want is give me a case that can stand in court. And with my background, I try as much as I can to be certain that the A to the Z of all steps and processes are properly and duly followed, so that when the time comes for the forensics of the evidence you have in court, they should be able to stand with some degree of certainty. At least you're certain that at least 70% of the facts you have presented in court will stand the test of time, no matter the degree of legal inquiry or scrutiny of those facts. So, from that point onward, it goes to the prosecution. The prosecution will do the charging of a suspect. He gets the case file and it goes through. But what we do in NAPTIP is, when a case is sent to the legal department, first of all, before it gets there, at the first stages of investigation, we have an SOP that deals with, that makes it imperative for every case to be investigated with, it's a trial case. They have a kind of three department involvement there. We have the investigation that takes the lead. We have the legal that provides legal guidance. Then we have the counselors. Counselors are involved because there are some victims of crime that are not very willing to talk openly at the first instance of contact with the investigator. So you need to have a professionally trained individual from the counseling department to talk to the victim, so that from that interface they'll be able to get evidence chronologically, sequentially, that will help you in the case. So when that is done, then a legal officer that is with you will help to guide, to be certain that, one, international practices are followed. We say the ASJA law here, the steps, the steps applied are equally followed, and in the process, you don't subject either the victim or the suspect to undue maybe ill treatment in any way whatsoever. So that is what we do in NAPTIP. These three departments must work together. That's why most time when our cases go up, they tell you it's good, you move forward. If it's not good, we take it backwards and try to see, we still go back again into it. Because like for us in NAPTIP, we are working, we have two essential elements, two laws that we work with. We have the TPR that has a national coverage. Then we have the VAP. The VAP, incidentally, is only applicable to Abuja. The VAP is the Violence Against Persons Act. It's only applicable to Abuja. Thank you. Challenges. We talk about challenges now in the investigation, prosecution of like thefts and the rest of the theft and cases. I used to have some colleagues that will say, our colleagues in EFCC, they've done so much. Those in ICPC, they've done so much. But when it comes to NAPTIP, we've not heard you that much. I say, yes, that is different. For them, they deal with sensational issues. They deal with the big wigs in society. On the other side, we are working more with helpless victims. The traffickers, most times, are outside this country. From our experience, what normally happens, they always ask, why is Italy so attractive? With due respect. What we discovered is, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, an Italo goes there, comes back, demolishes the father's mud house, and erect a fine, shiny structure, and the rest of them. Then 2 houses down your street, the father will come and tell the daughter, look at that fine house there. It was done by Yobosa, or it was done by Itoha. We are here just playing and just messing around, and the rest of them. So they will ask, what is involved? He will say, he will say, in pidgin language, the thing when that one feed do, myself feed do. What it means is, what the other lady can do, I can equal it to. So what you get now is, through such influences, they move towards Italy. So that has been there. It has become a historical pattern. So always ask, why Italy? Why Italy? Why Italy? So the thing is, if you don't understand this background sufficiently, it becomes an issue for you when it comes to prosecution. So that is why when events like this happen, and our Lordship, they are here, they will see things from a different perspective, that these victims are here. Yes, sometimes people look as if they accuse them of being complacent by acquiescing to such ploys of the traffickers. But the thing is, we are all susceptible to being deceived for a while. When she comes, you know how they do this thing. When they are coming, they come big. They go around communities and villages and claim, yes, we've arrived, we have the money, they throw money around, go to poor people, buy them salt, buy them rice, buy them things that make them happy. Where? Say, I want to go. She takes like 5 to 10 of them and the rest of them, they move on. I remember some 6 months back where, 8 months back, I was in Vienna where I went to interview a victim. She said, what happened? She left her local community in Edo and went to Delta. She was working with a restaurant owner, cleaning and cooking and the rest of them. Somebody came, they said she's based abroad, she wanted this, that. And they were able to assemble for her about 23 girls, thereabout. They left Nigeria and then got to Agadez, Sabrata, and Sabah, and they went down. And then when they got to Libya, they were stuck in Libya. Of course, you have to go to the Cork Connection House and the rest of them. And she said she worked. I was asking her, what kind of work did you do there? She said she had to work. That she has to work, but if she doesn't work, she will not be able to make enough money to make her cross the Mediterranean Sea. So she worked 10 to 30 men daily. And this girl was about 17 at the time I talked to her. But she left home 2 years before I talked to her. So you can see what she went through. She walked, and then luckily for her, a benevolent customer came and said, "Come and stay in my house. You have less to do." So instead of course, she was with him. This time, less work, less customers. Then he moved her across. She went, of course, to Europe. There in Italy, she was processed from the camp. She was taken and distributed to different houses there. But Italy started becoming saturated. So they need to move them out. So what they do like incursions to neighboring European countries. So she was on her way to Vienna in a train when the police saw her by virtue of her age and the backpack she was holding. Arrested. I said, "Where are you going to?" She said she's going to do what in Vienna. Stories. That was how they got her. We got talking to her and the rest of them. She was happy to see us. She was crying, but she said she cannot come back because if she comes back home, she has not made enough money to show why she traveled over there. So, if our judges don't understand these things properly, it might be a bit difficult for them to convict a trafficker when the trafficker is brought before them. So going further, it's the lack of access to exploiters who are resident in destination countries. This is an issue we have, but luckily for us, the Italians they've picked up courage. But the problem we have with the courage they picked is that traffickers are stopped for bringing in the victims as they used to in 2017. But then the traffickers are now stuck with the victims. They are taken now to detention camps in Libya, where they are exploited further. In Libya, they have about 70 camps operated by both government agencies and militia. The government has access to less than 24 of those camps. The rest are inaccessible. And the story we hear from them, from those we got and the rest of them, quite sordid. At least my boss was there in Libya with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and some other dignitaries for them to bring back our compatriots there based on presidential directive. A particular camp, they said they had about 350 Nigerians there. But then they prodded, they wanted to know exactly how many they have in that camp. But when they got there, they made physical check. They found that in that single camp, they have over 670 Nigerians in that camp. So what does that tell you? You're stopping these guys from coming over, but they have been stuck and sent back. What they do, they exploit them. They make you to call your parents under torture, your relations and the rest of them.
From the Prime Minister of Britain, Theresa May, she says, victims will only find freedom if we cultivate a radically new, global, and coordinated approach to defeat this vile crime. Together, we must work tirelessly to preserve the freedoms and values that have defined our United Nations from its inception. Together, we must work tirelessly to restore these freedoms and values to the lives of men, women, and children who are exploited for profit and held captive with little or no chance of escape. That is from Theresa May, the British Prime Minister. That's a very strong statement. In our partnership with CWAG, let me digress and conclude with the work that we have done in my state. We have formed other partnerships with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. We were among the first states to pass the Child's Right Law. The Child's Right Act, we have domesticated it into the Child's Right Law in Cross River State. And in my office of the Attorney General, we've also established a department which work with CWAG, we work with UNICEF to ensure that the Child's Right Law, which we have just domesticated, is not only left in the pages of the law books, but rather implementation becomes key. You all agree with me that Cross River State has a very large boundary between Equatorial Guinea, the Cameroons, which is very difficult, to actually monitor. Cross River State is a 21,000 plus square meter, which is about 9 times the size of Lagos. 5 times the size of all the states in the Niger Delta put together. That is the size of Cross River State. And what happens? The governor has set up a team that is cooperating with the Navy, the Army, and the police. And then we've established a homeland security with the sole purpose of stopping these traffickers from carrying people across the various creeks to Fernanda Po, to Cameroon, and the West African sub-region, to Central Africa. Because it's easy when you police the creeks. Otherwise, they deceive these children that they are going to go to Europe, but that now Libya is a no-go area. So they have to take them through the creeks to enter Cameroon, to enter Equatorial Guinea, and from there they are going to have a better life in Europe. Why is it so? Why has this idea of having a better life in Europe continued? I tell you, it's simple. Because the few who are lucky have come back and are building houses. And they are buying big cars. And they are taking care of their families. So there is no way you will tell them that, look, going to Europe through this dangerous creek, you end up being in a crate. They won't believe it because a few have been successful. So legislation must also look at a situation where those who have acquired, wealth and build houses through trafficking in persons, should be destroyed. We passed a law in the state which has criminalized hostage taking, what they call kidnapping, such that when the Australians, I'm sure this story everybody remembered, were kidnapped, we immediately got a conviction of those who were not directly related, but who gave
barrier. This is common, and that is why we are trying to see how best, like for us in NAPTIP, we have a significant number of our staff that are from the endemic state. Where are you from? Everybody just keep telling you all that. So what we did was, with due respect, we had to convince one of the guys there to just monitor them, and then through the monitoring, we came back 3-4 days after. We were able to identify that some are Igbo boys, some are Edo boys, some are Delta boys, and all that. From there, we were able to package them and say, okay, some are Senegalese, some are Gambians, and the rest of them. So that's how we were able to do that, because they try to obscure their own identity so that they will get more sympathetic hearing from the asylum authorities in Europe. Then the other one has to do with funding. Funding is always an issue. There are times we need to farm out cases to senior lawyers, especially when the cases are huge. So you need funding. Then talk about unstable victim and witnesses. That's also a factor. When witnesses undergo certain trauma, they do not wish to repeat this all over again. And again, we've already addressed refusal of victim witness to testify for fear of attack or reprisal or the rest of them. Then we'll talk again, evidence of child abuse, violence against persons, human trafficking are subject to heal, thereby obliterating the evidence. Yes, there are times this happens. About 3 months back or so, we had one lady that worked one communication company that had one of her maids that works with her. And whenever this girl misbehaves, she keeps the cane, not cane per se, this cable for your laptop cable. So she gives the girl to keep. When she misbehaves, she brings the cane and cane her. And when she canes her, she leaves welts. She leaves welts. marks all over her. And she likes to see the marks bleed. Once they bleed, that's when she's satisfied. She puts them aside. So by the time the girl was brought, we now asked our female officers to look at her, and they saw her. Some of our staff were about weeping because they said this is inhuman. Some had healed, some are still healing, but some were fresh. And we took those things and the rest of them. 2 weeks back, a man, a carpenter, was doing the same thing to his own biological son. He said the boy is very obstinate, the boy is stubborn, and the rest of them. He looks like a sadist, if I may use the word. He likes seeing the boy cry. He likes seeing the boy bleed. He likes seeing the boy broken and the rest of them. So these scars sometimes heal, especially for children. But then there are some, when wells are given, they hardly heal. So the ones that heal, you can't do anything about them. But the ones that are visible, you take. That is why when victims come, later they come, they're subjected to medical examination, and then we take photographs of them so that if in the process of being healed at the end of the day, the medicals we got will help us to handle cases handle that aspect when it comes to the courts. Then we're talking of way forward, proactive investigation, robust packaging of case files, an investigation report to each prosecutorial procedures in court, total commitment / personal initiative or personnel of the agency, that's an ATP, provision of equipment to enhance investigation, and proper compilation of case file, training and retraining of prosecutors and investigators, because we believe the capacity of the agency will best be served when investigators and prosecutors, as well as caregivers, are properly enhanced and up to par. The other one I had then, up to par. And furthermore, we're talking of establishing better relationship between investigators and prosecutors. This is internal. We are working on that. Allocation of more resources of trafficking for law enforcement, NGOs, and other stakeholders. These are necessary for the purposes of measurement and then tracking. Then we're talking to again of availability of better services for victims of trafficking, VOTs. Yes, that one is there. As like we say, my boss will always say, she needs what they call end-to-end package for victims of trafficking. So if a victim is rescued, if the victim is to be a tailor, seamstress, or whatever also, if he acquires those skills, you need to try to see if you get a shop for her. And then you'll be able to support her materials too. So that with the shop, you can easily track her, you can be able to measure her effectiveness in being reintegrated back in society and making herself too sustainable. Then we'll talk again too about substance abuse treatment for victims to ensure a more stable, better prepared witness. Yes, it's always an issue. It's an issue for some of the victims that have gone the other way. Then establishment of specialized courts to try human trafficking cases to mitigate time wastage and promote the expertise for the bench. Training of justice on how to try human trafficking cases. Yes, we are working with some international partners to ensure, because ASJA, that is the Administration of Justice Act of 2015, made it possible for us now to take electronic evidence. In the past, it was problematic for us. Now it's there. We're trying to see how we could do video conferencing so that, yes, the exploiter may be over there in Europe and the rest of them, or vice versa. We can, in a proper setting, be able to take that evidence through video conference, and then this will stand and be tenable before our judicial system. The pilot schemes will start from Lagos, Abuja, and then Benin. Lagos, Abuja, Benin. We are working towards that. And then training of judges to try human trafficking. Thank God, CWAG is here. They've been involved with this, and other international agencies too are also involved in this quest. In conclusion, I want to say that NAPTIP is doing its best to make investigators and prosecutors more responsive, efficient, and effective through the provision of operational equipment, gadgets, and working materials in the respective departments. The essence of justice is for the victim of crime to be rescued, protected, assisted, and rehabilitated, as well as being made to be economically strong enough in a sustainable manner. On the other side, it is also necessary that the offender is identified, is prosecuted, and given fair trial. Finally, investigators and prosecutors, alongside counselors, have crucial roles to play in making these work. I have crucial roles to play in making these work. Overcoming the identified barriers are imperatives all must work towards. Let's fight human trafficking professionally. Thank you for listening.
Please, another round of applause for him. So with that, we have come to the last segment for today. But before we go into that, I want to recognize the presence of Musa Idi Jidawa. He's the Permanent Secretary, State Emergency Management Agency of Yobe State. He was here. I think he left. So to take us to and to moderate the next segment, which is the panel discussion, where we are going to ask all the questions that we have been compiling since the morning, is Chief Anthony Idigbe, SAN. He's a seasoned legal practitioner with over 30 years' experience. Chief Anthony Idigbe, SAN, is the senior partner at Punuka Attorneys and Solicitors. He is my boss, proudly my boss. He was elevated to this rank of the Senior Advocate of Nigeria in 2000 and was recently admitted to practice law in Ontario, Canada. He is a former federal prosecutor under the Failed Bank Tribunal. He has also advised clients on several complex transactions and has represented major companies and institutions in the highest court of Nigeria. He's a well-known capital market legal advisor and has advised and acted as counsel to the Securities and Exchange Commission. He has extensive practice in the private sector as well as the public sector. Chief Anthony Idigbe graduated from the University of Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, in 1982 with a second-class upper degree. He also received the Honorable Justice Orojo Prize for the best student in company law. He finished from the Nigerian Law School, Lagos, in 1983, also with a second-class upper degree. He has 3 Masters of Law degrees from universities in the UK and Canada, as well as other diplomas and certifications from various professional organizations. With a round of applause, let us welcome Chief Anthony Idigbe, SAN.
Thank you very much. Your honors, my lords, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this is not time for vote of thanks, so I will not say the vote of thanks, but I just want to express my gratitude to NAPTIP for agreeing to this collaboration, which, as we can see today, has been very fruitful between CWAG and NAPTIP. For the roundtable discussion, I would like to invite the following to the podium. Mrs. Imabong Ladipo Sanusi, Anthony Da Silva, Maxwell Matawere, Joe Abang, the Attorney General across River State, Amanda Plisner, Greg Eseli, Richard LaBelle, and Arinze Mbanefo. A round of applause for all of them, please. On behalf of all of us, I would like to thank our panelists for the very wonderful presentation they gave us today. Please, another round of applause to them. I'm sure you would agree with me that we have all benefited enormously from their experience. The purpose of this roundtable is to enable us clarify any issues of concern that we have from them, as well as further tap from their vast experience. The way the roundtable will go is that I would remain standing, and I would invite questions. And in addition, I have some questions that I have prepared to lead the discussion. If you wish to ask any question, please just raise up your hand. There will be somebody nearby with a microphone to enable you ask the question. Thank you. Mayowa. Okay.
My question is to the last speaker. On the page entitled Charging Suspects, he wrote this, and I quote, "Once the suspect is arrested, the investigator does his work to investigate the case thoroughly." Now my question is, does the arrest comes before the investigation, or should the investigation comes before the arrest? Now the reason why I'm saying this is because now NACTAL on his own is trying to expand on what Imabon said. What they're doing in Abuja, we're trying to do it all over the country, because we realize that some of the challenges that we may be having has to do with how the evidence is recorded and documented in the first instance. And so when this is considered, you then realize the reason I'm asking that question, that when we have soldiers all over the country, not just in Abuja, and they are well trained, they have to be trained in order to be able to get evidences against the traffickers. And when you get them, do you arrest them first before you now start investigating, or you complete your investigation first before arresting them? It doesn't mean you can't invite them, but the issue there is in arresting and then doing your investigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe we should take this just to tell you that there will be training session going on tomorrow and the day after, especially for native prosecutors and investigators. And I'm sure that many of these issues, the issue that you have raised particularly, will be addressed there. If I would share with you some of the
are things that may fall within this subject in terms of the main employer making payments to the contractor, and the contractor paying these employees. You find a lot of things there. I know it's majorly labor, but I wonder if NAPTIP is looking at that area to find whether there is any element of maltreatment and trafficking in that regard. It might come up with some interesting discoveries.
Thank you.
My comment is that this is so important for judges. Well, today, I mean, we've all had just ideas, vague ideas, reading in the papers about what NAPTIP does. But coming here today, I've gained a lot, and I want to suggest that there should be some kind of collaboration between CWAG, NAPTIP, and the NJI to see if this could be put in the curriculum of the Institute for Judges. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the next question, I don't know whether our facilitators from the U.S. want to share experiences on how, massive labor issues are dealt with around human trafficking.
Good afternoon. I wanted to just generally answer the question about investigation, the American experience. Generally, what you're going to have in any criminal case, whether it be human trafficking or anything else, is you have to have a sufficient investigation underway to have probable cause to arrest a suspect. And so you have to have enough investigation, enough foundation to say, one, that a crime was committed, and two, that person committed the crime. And until you have that much of a foundation, you can't arrest. And so that's generally for any crime, but for human trafficking, it may take more work to get to having a human trafficking crime. But until you have that established and until you can connect it to that person, then that person should not be arrested. And that would be the experience for anything.
Thank you. On the labor issue, do you have anything to say, Richard or Amanda? Okay, if I may explain what the question was that there was a suggestion that there's a practice of outsourcing where big companies don't want to get involved with any labor issues, and so they basically just engage another company to employ, let's say, 1,000 people or 2,000 people. So they pay that company because they've outsourced the job, and they are therefore not concerned with the so-called working conditions or the terms between the company to which they have outsourced the job and their staff, who are not regarded as the staff of the company that the main company. So the suggestion is that is there an issue around that could turn that sort of transaction into human trafficking, and what should NATIP be looking at when they are faced with such, massive? You could go to a factory and see people are working in very bad conditions, and you go to the company and they say, well, I'm sorry, they are not our employees because, we have sourced the job to X company. Do you have such experiences, and how do you deal with it?
Yes. We call that in the United States and California supply chain transparency. And quite recently, just a few years ago, law was passed in California requiring that any business does a certain amount of work within the state of California conduct reporting on where it is that their labor is taking place, and it answers a number of other questions related to the labor they're using to produce their products and to distribute their products. That information has to be publicly available on their website. And there's, some information, some requirements about what exactly they must report and where on the website it has to be contained. For instance, it has to be easy to find, and like I said, available to the public. That's a statutory element, though. That is a law that the California state legislature passed requiring that transparency if businesses want to do business in or with the state of California, to prevent businesses from being able to hide behind exactly what it is that you're describing and shift the burden or shift the blame to somebody else. So in that sense, my suggestion is really a legislative one, to enact a legislative change that holds businesses accountable for the decisions, the business decisions that they're making, because that is in essence what you're describing. It's a business decision to use cheap or trafficked labor, but to hide behind another company and point the finger at that company instead. The other potential approach would be to read very broadly the labor trafficking statute, such that if it could be shown that the company had knowledge or reason to believe that that the contracting company was using trafficked labor, that they could still be held responsible because of the requisite intent or knowledge that that's what was going on. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
And to add to that, an informal source could be trade associations, labor associations. A good example would be the garment industry in California. Often you will have garment manufacturers that are using trafficked labor to reduce their costs. And the competitors will know that. And they're losing business. And often they will put pressure. And they may go to investigators and to prosecutors knowing that maybe one company is now sourcing their manufacturing to another company that's using trafficked labor. And then that could come to light that way. And so trade associations, business associations can often be a good source to be able to make that connection.
Okay, thank you. Just in terms of information, in terms of the jurisprudence in Nigeria, the National Industrial Court, in a couple of recent cases, has already held that there is what they call in their jurisprudence, which is now the Court of Appeal, constructive employment. That's the language of the National Industrial Court. Because what is happening is that some staff sue the main company that they are working for, and then they sue the outsourcing company, and then they usually the main company will argue that, well, you are not our staff, but usually they would have like a staff ID in order to enter the premises. So there's no contract. But they have a staff ID by which they get into the company. And the recent jurisprudence in Nigeria from the National Industrial Court is that they call it constructive employment. And they've held the companies liable under the term. So that's still being challenged. I'm only just sharing that information. Milord, yes.
I am Mosumola Dikpeolu from Ogun State Judiciary. My comment or my observation is that from the discussions we've had today, more emphasis is placed on Section 18 about prostitution, this human trafficking for prostitution. And while Section 23 is like being watered down. And like in Ogun State where I come from, we have a lot of borders with Benin Republic, very porous borders. And they bring in a lot of children to work in Nigeria. Children. I've had calls to come in contact with one, like 5-6-year-old child brought to Nigeria to work. I looked at this child and I thought, if I leave this child for them to take away, they will take this child somewhere else. I happen to have an orphanage. So I put that child in the orphanage. He was going to school. And after about 2 years, the father surfaced. Apparently the child was brought by an agent. And somewhere along the line, the agent died. So the father had to come personally to Nigeria to trace the child. The father met the child at the orphanage, already going to school, speaking good English. And of course, he withdrew the child, took the child away. Maybe to work somewhere else, or back to Benin Republic, I wouldn't know. But that happens a lot in Ogun State. And it's like there's nothing anybody can do about it. Also, hawking. You find these children employed and they hawk. And this is how they get raped, they get abused. Sometimes I'll meet them and sort of arrest in court and ask them to lead me to whoever employed them. And I'll tell them, I'm going to take you to the police. This child is too young to be hawking or to be working. And they'll say, oh, she has gone to school or she's learning a trade. It is after that she now helps the family. Sometimes it is the parents, mothers, who ask their children to hawk. Little children, along the line they get abused. What is NAPTIP doing about this situation?
Thank you. I think this is a very interesting issue. I don't know whether to combine that question and sort of add to the question, sort of rephrase it to the panel to talk about the line between culture and tradition around apprenticeship and family support system, which has always existed, and human trafficking. Maybe Mr. Arinze, who went into details, Arinze Mbanefo went into details about those different sections. Maybe he can kick it off, and then we also would like to hear from the Attorney General of Cross Rivers, where they also have porous borders and have this very strong tradition as well, like other parts of Nigeria have the tradition of apprenticeship and family support. Where do you draw the line between human trafficking and an apprenticeship arrangement, traditional family support of the poorer side of the family by the more affluent side of the family?
Okay. The dividing line we have here is in cases of child labor. What do you look out for? The basic parameter, the basic parameter you have there is exploitation. You find out that the means you are looking out for in any case of child exploitation is child labor is exploitation. If you cannot determine exploitation, then it becomes difficult. One is that they may say they are working for their mothers, they are working for their fathers, like we said. The traditional fostering system you have, somebody stays, goes out in the morning, comes back, remits the mother to the money to the mother, who uses the same money to pay for his school fees the next day. Now, where do you start drawing the line of exploitation? How has the mother exploited those children? And then, still bearing in mind the issue of our demography, yes, it's like we've given more emphasis to trafficking for prostitution, but there are different forms of trafficking peculiar to some areas. Like Abuja, you have more of domestics, child domestics here, using children underage to work as domestic servants. Down the south, you have more of trafficking for labor, like the Cross River, you have children working in quarries. Ogun State, a lot of quarries in Ogun State. So you find out that really, what you look out for is that who is actually taking them? What are they taking them out for? If it's for monetary, for financial benefit, for exploitation, yes, that is trafficking. But on the other hand, like I said, if they are working for the family, then that's a social problem altogether, which the various states' child right law will have to deal with. They are not trafficking simplicity.
Thank you. Mr. Matawere, may we know your experience? We see that from your CV you are very strong in child rights advocacy. What's your experience with traditions against drawing the line between traditions and trafficking? How do you maneuver through that challenge? Or you don't have the challenge in Malawi?
No, it's a big challenge. Traditionally, most parts of our country, most of them will not say we want to go to colleges or secondary school, that is primary school. They will rather follow their fathers to South Africa. For a long time, the government of South Africa, and now Mozambique, as there was an arrangement where most of the Malawians will be taken into South Africa for mining. When that ended, it was left in the hands of business people, and eventually it has become an issue of trafficking. And these are models to young ones in Malawi. So most of young ones will grow knowing that upon reaching the final class in primary school, then I'm a potential migrant. or victims to South Africa. So this is a culture which people are growing up with. To deal with that issue, this is one of the reasons why we said, okay, let us focus our development of the TIP Act in two fronts. One, let us look at the legislative element that deals with arrest and punishment. Then also, let us protect the interest of Malawians by focus more on prevention. So the prevention program look at changing people's attitude, transforming the culture, dealing with those traditional issues from the grassroots. So that's the reason why we said let us encourage participation of individuals, communities, and also use what we call sustainable financing and approaches. So sustainable financing approaches is actually engaging local structures with that idea that maybe in 10 years we should be able to remove all these harmful cultural practices, then replace it with a culture that will be human rights centered approach.
Okay, thank you. I know that in Europe the culture of apprenticeship was sort of eliminated and replaced with the culture of professionalization. So, I mean, before you couldn't be a lawyer except by apprenticeship, and you couldn't even be a doctor except by apprenticeship. You had to go to somebody, and then they teach you, and then one day they say you are not a doctor or you are not a lawyer. You didn't have to do any exams as such. But Europe and of course in the Americas, I don't know whether they have any culture existing around some of these issues. So I will be calling on the Americans to share their experience. But before then, let's hear from the Attorney General of Cross River State.
Thank you, moderator. Ours is a very pathetic story. And what the government in Cross River State has done by the domestication of the child's right law is to say that this slave mentality of houseboy, house girl, where all over the country people have to look up to Cross River State to get their ever ready supply of houseboys and house girls. We as a government have come to completely eradicate that. So what we have done is not just domesticating the Child's Right Act, but setting up implementation task force, like I told you during my lecture, that that task force is domiciled in my ministry, in my office. I have had to close down a school where the lady who was running the school claimed that she was looking after motherless babies. But our investigation from the Ministry of Justice revealed that this woman had just gone to some places, caught children who were hawking for their parents, and moved them to that home. The parents were looking for the children and did not know that the children were in that home. And so when we got complaints that they were looking for these children, we also used the police to look for the children. We eventually traced them to that home, and she could not explain how she now got these people. But you must understand that it's not everybody that wants to keep a home that has the interest of these children. She was using this home to get monies from NGOs, claiming that she was doing the society a whole lot of good. So the culture, tradition of slavery, houseboy, housegirl mentality, does not, it's not in our culture in Cross River State. And therefore, as a government, we have decided to stamp that out completely. So if you're looking for a houseboy, housegirl, probably Cross River State might not be your destination anymore, because we have made it possible for children to go to school up to the ages of 10 and 15, free, basically free. So you have to go to school. It's only in Cross River State that you will agree with me. You've had the governor say anybody that earns below 30,000 cannot pay tax. That happens only in Cross River State. We do not get taxes from people who are operating barbing salon, small restaurants, and all that. We do not collect taxes from those people. And the government went further to enlarge, it's you all are aware that we are the only state with 29 commissioners and 3,000 political appointees. Because he believed in the Carnation theory, we've been able to enlarge government and get all those who did not have anything to do, to get an income at the end of every month. And that has stabilized completely the crime rate in the state.
Thank you. Mrs. Sanusi wants to say something. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I still want to make reference to the woman from Ogun State. One of the NGOs that can be of help is Test the Home. Test the Home. They are doing a lot in Ogun State, and they are doing a lot through the borders around Nigeria. I want to also expatiate on child labor, that in Africa we have this family fostering system, if I'm right, because I'm your auntie, I can take you along, you can live with me. But this has been exploited for so long. So for the child labor issue, where we look at it as a boiled egg, the outer layer, that is children in economic situation, a child can be in the house, window shop. Auntie, I want to buy water. You sell the water, and it doesn't disrupt the child's school. And then the inner circle, which is the yolk, the white part of the egg now, child labor. You see children in Wuse Market pushing wheelbarrow when they're supposed to be in school. And then the inner circle, which is the yolk, actually, children in hazardous situation. I think when we take cognizance of this, it will go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Amanda.
What I'll add to that is I believe that the analysis should be based on the child's well-being and the point at which the labor interferes with the child's well-being and interferes with the ability of the child to exhibit age-appropriate behavior. If the labor is keeping the child from going to school, I think that's a problem. If the labor is causing the child to feel mentally, emotionally, physically distressed, that's a problem. If the labor is keeping the child from doing anything that would allow that child to reach his or her maximum potential throughout the course of their own life, then that's a problem. And I think if we really focus on, hone in on the impact on the child, it'll make it easier to see where that line is, because it's not going to be the same in every situation. In the United States, we refer to it as adultification. It's a made-up word, but it's used to refer to children who, because of their trafficking environment, no longer act like children. So I think if you keep that in mind and evaluate whether the child you're looking at is continuing to act like a child, whatever that means for that child in that family, in that city or culture or state, whether it's being able to play outside or, like I said, going to school, I think that should really be where the assessment starts.
Thank you. Anthony?
My observation was more generally in legal concept, and how sometimes one crime can be another crime or beget another crime. And in a situation with children, sometimes you may want to look at the crime of child abduction, even though you may not have human trafficking. And who's moving the child and for what purpose? And that could be a crime in and of itself, something that you may want to think about, especially across international lines. And you have the 1980 Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction and other treaties that could come into play, and it's something to consider in any child movement or any human trafficking situation.
Thank you. That leaves us with a very little issue that is not very clear yet. Apparently, from the question of her leadership, she she was handicapped. There was nothing she could do because the father came and took the child. What resources does she have? I mean, could the state have kept that child from this foreign father who had basically trafficked his own child? Parental rights against the rights of the child, and then the system generally. How are you dealing with it in NATIP, this conflict between the parental rights and the rights of the child, and then the interest of the system?
Okay. For us, the example given by our Lordship had to do with Ogun State. Essentially, Ogun State is very peculiar because we have numerous quarries there. And we have this traditional, I think this community called Imeko, something like that also. Yes, Imeko. They have Imeko there. They have components in Nigeria and in Benin Republic. You can hardly demarcate, you can hardly distinguish between Nigeria and the community. And then because of the mining bureaus there, if you go there at certain times of the day, you check, you will hardly see anybody. But then they have bureaus that are working under the ground, in the quarries and the rest of them. And so what they do is that it's over 50 years, so tradition. It's a cultural thing there, that every family must send his child to Nigeria to work in those farms and the rest of them. So it's an issue. But what we're able to do was we're able to work with Terre des Hommes, like my colleague and my fellow panelist said, and Terre des Hommes, and then some other international partners. They've been able to see that you don't bring children that are below the age of 12 to work there, because then you had because of the, like I said, the cultural thing. Some parents are bringing their kids that are as young as 5, 7, below 10 to work there. So when I will be able to arrange such a way that so maybe you take maybe tolerable to some extent those that are above 14 or thereabouts or so. But then when you find instances where people below that are involved, of course, either you arrest the mine owner or otherwise. So like you asked, which comes first? It's a moral issue, the parents' economic survival, then the child's sociological upbringing. So who takes precedence? It's a bit dicey. Circumstance determines, and what the law says is that for us in NAPTIP, anybody below the age of 12 should not be employed in any form of domestic engagement. And if the person is even below 17 or so, the person should not be subjected to any work that will undermine his psychological, physical, physiological, well-being or so in any way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Question? Okay, let's take the lady in the center there.
My name is Mary George, Deputy Commissioner of Police. I charge anti-woman trafficking in the Nigerian Police Force. My question goes to Mr. Greg Esele, the last speaker.
Your colleague.
Yes. Yes. In the area of way forward, you talked about proactive investigation. I know it's a very good area, it's a very good point, which involves a lot of intelligence gathering. In order to achieve this fight, we need a lot of intelligence gathering. Now, my question is, what is your synergic approach in achieving that? Because you said you work with a lot of agencies, sister agencies. How effective are you going to achieve that? Or do you have a department trained to take care of that? This is a fight that involves everyone, especially the police department. How effective? How do you carry them along in achieving that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we can take one more question together. Jake, you wanted to ask a question? Here. Yeah. We'll take one or two questions so we can just take them together, yeah. Here. And then after him, then the gentleman over there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to cheat and actually ask two questions, if I might. Sorry about that. First of all, thanks again to everybody for being here. I know I learned a lot, and congratulations to NAPTIP and CWAG for bringing this event together. My question is two-part. First and foremost, perhaps our esteemed colleague from Whatcliff could speak a little bit more to what gaps there are in terms of services to survivors of trafficking. The most important gap, the highest priority from your perspective in terms of ensuring the well-being of survivors. And secondarily, I know on the prosecution side, there have been some cases in which judges were not necessarily familiar with all of the aspects of the 2015 law, which is, of course, exceptional and a model for across the continent and across the world. I wonder, so for example, there have been cases where people have been convicted of trafficking and have been allowed to pay fines, right, rather than go to prison, which is required under the law. If we set a goal for tomorrow to have every judge in Nigeria 100% conversant in all aspects of the law, what would be the most efficient way to provide that training? What are the mechanisms that already exist in Nigeria that we could plug into to ensure that it reaches all judges as quickly as possible? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think with respect to your second question, His Lordship sitting next to you had already suggested that we should try to collaborate with the National Judicial Institute, and then that will give us a forum to reach out to more judges. I think we'll take that on board. I mean, of course, subject to additional suggestions based on your questions that may come from the panel. We'll take one more question and then we'll revert to the panel.
Thank you, sir. My name is Olusegun Lanre Yoda. I represent the Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Ogun State. This first question goes to Richard. When he was speaking, he mentioned the TRAC's tracing of illicit funds of traffickers. I'm only wondering if at all TRAC has ever done such things in Nigeria, because I know this environment is filled with potholes, and if they have ever collaborated with NAPTIP to do that, and how successful it has been. Then again, I wonder, this is to Whatcliff and NAPTIP. Her Lordship mentioned something about orphanages, and I know our orphanage is not into such things, and as mentioned by the Honorable Attorney General and Commissioner for Justice, Cross River State, I learned from the news about a week or two ago that the Immigration Service accused some orphanages of being neck deep in trafficking. I want to know if Whatcliff and NAPTIP is seized of these facts. If they are, how far have they been proactive in tackling this menace? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will then refer to the panel to tackle some of these questions. I'm sure you've been taking notes. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Mary George. It's nice to see you here. Yes. She talked about what we're doing about synergy. Like I said, the NAPTIP was a creation of law, and before NAPTIP came on board, after 2000, that's the UNTOC, we had the we have Immigration Service, the police, and one or two other agencies having small units of human trafficking in their organizations. In 2003, when NAPTIP came on board, most of these units formed the core of early staff of NAPTIP. And thereafter, we've had very strong relationships with these organizations. I know this because we have a lot of collaboration. And for the police here in Abuja, I would say it's extremely very, very cordial. We get 2-3 cases on a regular basis from the FCT. The one that we got about 3 weeks back had to do with a so-called herbal doctor that runs a magic, what do I call it, home for pregnant women or so. The police referred the case to us because of the case they got, and we opened up the case to find that this man is a medical doctor, herbal, and then he has a place where he gives women herbal, trash, no, it's not trash per se, herbs and the rest of them. They pretend that they are pregnant, and then they go to Port Harcourt to deliver babies. They are giving people's babies, and then brought it down here. For now, we are trying to open up the case, and we discovered that the guy is involved in about 161 other cases involving children. So when the Attorney General talked about orphanages and the rest of them, yes, these orphanages, some of them are outlets for baby factories, and some of them too are adoption grounds for unfortunate people that need children. We are looking at that too. We are looking seriously at that, and within the confines of our law, because the law says sale of babies, sale of human beings, not just babies, sale of human beings. So we're looking at that. So we're not just keep quiet. So currently we are working on a protocol, agreement actually, that involves all security agencies in the country. NIS, Federal Road Safety, Nigeria Police, and Nigerian Prisons, Nigerian Customs Service, the DIS, the NIA, and the rest of them. We've held 2 sessions of the meeting in Kaduna. And between now and the next 2 months or so, the two will be out. So that will show you that every agency has a role to play in this, just like we have within securitization architecture in the country. Thank you. Finally, let me react to the first question I was asked about is it investigation first or arrest or so. And like my colleague from the US said, most times it depends on the circumstance. And if we could talk of flight fear. When you have fear of flight, you're always very careful as to when to react. And when you talk again too about tampering with evidence, then you just don't have to go about it. There are cases that you need to pick the suspect almost immediately because of what they call it, flight fear. But there are other ones you take time. You build around the case. It takes about a month, 6 months, some 2 years or so. Once that is established, because you are very certain that the suspect is domiciled in your locality, even if he has networks, you've been able to track his networks. You wiretap and you know exactly, you're able to geotag where everybody is. But for us here in Nigeria, because of high mobility here, a man will be here, the next thing he moves to Nyanya, you can hardly locate the house in Nyanya because the addresses are almost non-existent. So as you see the guy, you pick him almost immediately, then you start digging up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Sanusi, there's a question about gaps in services to victim and the mechanism to ensure that all the judges are familiar with the law, the new law, the 2015 law.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll first of all address gaps by Jack. Okay, I'll tell you a story first of all. Story. On the 18th of January, Wycliffe got a call to rescue a presumed victim. If NAPTIP does not make a referral to us, we also do our rescue mission. When we got to the police station, it took us about 10 hours to even establish a case. Why? Because the officer there did not really know what trafficking is all about. We were referred to another divisional police. It was a police outpost, so we were referred to another place. When we got there, we were so lucky. Around 11 p.m., that was when we got an officer who has been trained by Wycliffe. The case was an alleged case of trafficking, and the girl's father came to force her into child marriage. The person we met at the police station insisted that that child should sleep in the police station, then we should go away because he didn't know who we were. So first of all, it is always very difficult if we don't train an officer. So training and retraining of officers is very important. When an officer is trained, sometimes they are transferred. So it's a challenge. You see, in the police station, where if it's Gariki, we know who to call. If it is Duse, we know who to call. But sometimes when the officer is transferred, it is not that officers don't know what to do, but not all officers always know what to do, especially in the case of trafficking. Recently, I don't know if Mrs. Kosoko is here. When she saw me, she was in tears. I'm sure she left the hall because there was a case we were handling. It was actually an officer that raped a 40-year-old, and she gave birth to a baby. The baby is with us still. We make referral. The baby is with somewhere anyway. Yeah. You know why she's angry? She says, can you imagine? That man was released on bail. And his friends were celebrating. Oh, you're back, you're back, you're back, you see. So it's very painful. You know, the case of establishing a rape is very difficult. It's very difficult because if I'm raped in Nigeria sometimes, I'd rather keep my mouth shut than come openly and start explaining what happened. So victims too, they can help, but sometimes it's difficult to lay hold on them. And another thing is capacity building for staff. Human trafficking work is humanitarian work. I was joking with you. I said, it's just like working in a church or working in a religious setup. The pay is poor. So when people get better jobs, you just throw away all the trainings they have gotten and they walk away. Another thing is funds to carry out awareness. We established, Nigeria is a source, a transit, and a destination state, a country. We established an anti-trafficking community watch in Abuja because Abuja is a transit place. Most of the times when we go to carry out awareness or to monitor the watch group, the members who are made up of women, market women, motorbike riders, transporters, sometimes they say, we don't have time to gather because, say if we leave work, sorry, this is pidgin. If we leave our work, we no go sell, how will you make the money for the day? But if you tell them that, okay, come, there's a meeting, there's a training, I'll give you something at the end of the day. It motivates them. And sometimes the IEC material goes a long way. Sometimes we don't have enough IEC materials to do this awareness. And another one is the enactment of the Child's Right Act in all the states is very important. I think if all states can enact that right, it's going to go a long way. And the area of data collection and research is a big problem. Wycliffe has carried out a research on knowledge, attitude, and practice. Since then, we have not updated. We found out a lot of things with the new trends in trafficking. But it's so difficult when you're trying to pay your staff. You know what I mean? And then institutional abuse, you talked about that. I think I'll make reference to that. NAPTIP is a one-stop shop. And Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development, I think they are on top of their game. I also think one of the things we can do is to do like a data bank for every duty bearer. Like me, I'm a duty bearer. We should try to, have a background check on everyone who claims to be a duty bearer, especially someone who is like in a shelter. We have a shelter to prevent something we call further victimization and then to prevent further abuse. I think it's good to have a data bank for everyone who is a duty bearer. Where you have a background check, you know who is handling the case of a child. I'm proud to say the Attorney General of Yobe State is here. He knew me when I was wearing my NYC uniform in 1995, so he can say a lot about me. So I think NAPTIP too should do that. should have a background check on everyone. It will go a long way. I don't know if I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matawere wants to say something before you speak, Richard. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to quickly comment that it's very important indeed that we should always check the businesses of orphanages. You might recall a few years ago, a popular pop singer called Madonna was in our country. I personally challenged her in court because her behavior and her conduct seems to send a wrong signal that ordinarily without that challenge could have facilitated trafficking of children for orphanages. Based on experience, we have witnessed some situation where orphanages could compete. There's a foreigner that want to adopt, like Madonna herself. She first went to an orphanage, then eventually, most of the orphanage run by Americans and British people from Britain. They started auctioning children. The first orphanage was offering expenses amounting to $18,000. Then the other one said, for us, it's about $30,000. So there was that debate. And as we are talking, there are so many orphanages that have actually put auctioning of children on their websites with a certain amount that in order for you to come and adopt a child from an orphanage, these are the possible costs. And as we are talking, there was a gentleman from UK who was arrested after he had adopted 7 children from an orphanage, the youngest being an infant of 9 months. When we started investigating him, just last year, when we started investigating him, we failed because he had all the necessary documentation from social inquiry reports and court orders. Everything was there. And we felt completed to prosecute him. Why am I saying this? There are so many instances of corruption that happens around orphanages. So it's very important indeed to put orphanages on the check. We need to discourage the admission of children orphanage in the first place. And again, we need to develop stringent regulations for management of orphanages. We really need to also to engage the public. Things are changing now. We used to care for our own children in our community, but now money has taken priority. All children have been taken away from the communities, from the families, into an orphanage because money is involved. So these are things that we need to discourage and start caring for our children in our families.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have actually run out of time, so we'll give Richard the last shot to address the issue of tracing of illicit funds of trafficking, and then I'll round up. Thank you.
Sure. To address, I believe you had asked a question about where I discussed how we track the traffickers' money, and if we had done anything with NAPTIP up until this point. So legally, I don't know if you caught it, but when I was given part of my portion of the presentation, we have the data set that we're limited to is the southwestern United States and the country of Mexico for legal reasons and a couple of other reasons. I had specifically requested data from Western Union, the biggest money service business in the world, just specifically for this presentation. And it was during the course of discussions with them that they had discussed a willingness to be able to work with law enforcement here to do it. I would like I said earlier today, I would highly recommend it. I think it's a tremendous way to conduct these investigations from a different angle. And I know Jake, our counterpart here from the embassy, has offered up his services to try and help facilitate that. I can put him into contact with the people from Western Union, and you guys can try and make that happen. We'll, of course, in the States, we'll offer as much service as we can to you guys to help analyze any data that you might get your hands on. But I definitely think it's a worthy way of going about it.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause for this wonderful panel. We've learned so much today, and we can see a lot of issues we can follow up on to strengthen the relationship between CWAG and NATEP. I think from the discussions today, it appeared that there are always challenges improving the criminal cases because of the victims not being cooperative, etc. And so there is a need from the discussions to ensure that it is possible to prove some of these crimes even without the victims. And the issue of ability to trace the funds and create a criminal enterprise where you can you can prove the case just by having the investigation officers give the testimony, and you call the money transfer companies to give evidence, and you build your case around money laundering. That can put them away without the necessity of putting the witnesses, the victims, on the stand. It's clear also from what we've heard today that there may be some need for some level of law reform to ensure that the victims are not re-victimized. And that is why we have to sort of find a way using law to shift the burden away from the victims having to prove their innocence, as it were. And that is the reason why you also find that it's difficult to get them to come and give evidence. So some of that issue of law reform includes, for instance, from what we've heard, an agenda to push for ratification of more treaties with more countries so that there will be better exchange and local realization of assets for those that are convicted abroad. These assets will go to the Victims Fund and help promote the job of NATEP. In addition, which from the discussions today, we need to find more ways of reconciling some of those traditions. I mean, I know that the Attorney General of Cross River State made a very blanket statement that they have banned house help and houseboy in Cross Rivers. I know it's not as simple as that. But looking at the Ogun State example of the mining business there and the traditional relationships, we need to find a way to redefine our approach in terms of the relationships between the various parties, and we need to begin to think about law reform. For instance, instead of fighting it and criminalizing it, is there a way we can civilize it? And I'll give a typical example. Would it be better to deal with the problem by requiring that every mining company should have a school with a guarantee that the children must attend a certain minimum of school time and would be entitled to a certain minimum of rest, etc., and controls on the hours that they work? That way you could maintain the tradition, ensure they go to school, and ensure that they are fairly treated. So, I'm just saying that there's a lot of work that we need to do in terms of law reform, in terms of rearranging the relationships. And again, it's not only here, and that's why it has to be international. It's clear from the discussions today, we need to strengthen our law enforcement. We need to secure more conviction. We need to put them away in prisons as a deterrence. But that will not be the full solution. We also need education and awareness. And I think from the discussions today, we realize that it's not only in Nigeria that we need the education and awareness, all over the world, particularly in the demand-creating countries as well. Thank you for attending. The symposium is now at an end. We wish you safe journey as you go to your respective homes. Please, I think there should be some feedback forms. I'm not sure whether they've distributed the feedback forms. We need to hear from you first on what your impressions are about the symposium, what we did right and what we did wrong, and what we can reform, and the topics and issues you think we should tackle in future. If the feedback form was not distributed, please go to the website and fill the form. We try to be as digital as possible so we can keep track of all the data. And that leads us to one last issue about database. One thing that is clear is that there's need to have access to database. That is the intelligence we are talking about that assists the investigation. And you need to have all sorts of databases. You need access to those databases, like the one on the money transfer. I believe that NATIP would follow up with CWAG to ensure that they are they are put in contact with the money transfer organizations and CBN, so you can get all the approvals to have access to that sort of data, and CWAG can then exchange knowledge on how to interpret the data and be able to identify activities even before they become apparent. Also, they need to create databases. If you go anywhere abroad and you wanted to find out in your neighborhood who are the sexual offenders who are around here, you just go to the internet and put just put the question, and it will tell you, oh, there's one living here and another one living over there. And these things are important. If the database is not available, there's no deterrence to these people, and then it's difficult to do investigation, and then you have to arrest before investigating. Thank you very much.
Please, another round of applause for all our facilitators. They have been wonderful. Please, they need to take your picture down here, sir. Please, they need to take your picture, all the facilitators. Please, all your pictures together. Thank you very much. And to give the vote of thanks, I will invite Mr. Desmond Garba to come and give us the vote of thanks.
Hey, this is great, sir. Is it good afternoon or good evening, everybody? The day is fast spent. I'm not going to take your time at all. I'm standing here on behalf of the Director of Training and Manpower Development to give the vote of thanks. I want to first and foremost thank the Director General NAPTIP for her support and then for her well-deserved keynote address that she gave us. We want to thank CWAG and then the Director of CWAG for all their efforts, both financially and otherwise, for what they did, and for putting this program together. We also want to thank all the facilitators. The facilitators did a wonderful work. It's a rewarding experience. We all we know about, we saw it, and there is nobody that came here and have gone back the same. We also want to thank the chief judges and the representative of the chief judges of the state We want to thank the Attorney Generals of the state and their representatives. We want to thank especially the Attorney General of Cross River State. If you look at his presentation, it was very inciting and very illuminating. I followed it. I was particularly interested to see if he was going to make errors because we are experts in trafficking, but he did justice to the subject. We want to also thank the Malawian presenter who took his time and gave us the Malawian experience and all that. At least all of us here have an insight into how trafficking goes in Malawi and all that. Then we want to thank the presenters from the United States. They did a wonderful work, and we are all happy about it, and all that. Collaboration is very important because it has actually made us to understand what happens over there and all that. And this kind of intelligence sharing and sharing is very, very important. We now know how their own perspective of trafficking in persons, We want to thank also I want to thank my senior colleagues that are all here, especially some of my directors that are here. I also want to particularly thank my director TMD. To put this thing together, he didn't go on leave. In fact, he was on a working leave. There was no day he was not coming to the agency because of this program. He was always there for us and all that. He didn't enjoy his leave at all. For that sacrifice, I want to thank him for what he has done, I want to thank some other colleagues from CWAG, especially Ebele, telephone calls, consultations, meeting here and there. I want to also thank Eric, thank Gloria, thank Afame Funa, and all, so many of them and all that. And who have I not thanked? Thank who again? Everybody. Once again, today is a good day. It's one of the most beautiful symposiums I've attended in recent times. And we are grateful to all of you for right now. If you're going back to your destinations, we wish you a safe journey back to your destinations. For those I remember to thank, I've already thanked you. Thank everybody that came here. Thank all of you for coming. Thank all of you for making the occasion a huge success. We are happy with you. And we're looking forward to have an occasion like this again when we have this kind of able representations and all that. Thank you so much. And God bless you. Once again, for the staff of NAPTIP, you still have a training. We have an in-house training for you tomorrow and next tomorrow. Apart from that, if other dignitaries are going back, you wait behind. Maybe they will want to tell you one or two things before you go. Every staff of NAPTIP, please wait behind. Give us we're not going to take so much time. You know a lot of you are exhausted. You are just clapping to stop me from talking. I'll stop talking. Don't worry. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you. Barakan Kude. God bless you. Oh, PPR, thank you very much. PPR, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please let's stand to our feet for the closing prayer. Please let us stand to our feet for the closing prayer. We started with prayer and we're going to end with prayer. Please let us stand to our feet for closing prayer. In Jesus' name. Father, we just want to thank you for what a wonderful, successful program. Thank you for helping us to be a voice to the voiceless. Father, we ask that even as we go forth, that you will give us a voice to really speak for the voiceless. Create the passion in our hearts even to fight the scourge of human trafficking. Let this symposium not just end here, but let the learning experience translate into the fight against human trafficking. In all this we pray and ask, even as we go to our various destinations, that you take us back safely. In Jesus' mighty name we have prayed. Amen. Thank you very much. Please don't forget to go to the website www.cwagworkshop.org www.cwagworkshop.org to fill the feedback form and also get all the conference material. All the conference material will be uploaded to the website. You can even watch the YouTube of all the presentation that went on if you go to the website. Please help us to fill the feedback form so that we can get better the next time. Thank you very much. Yes. Please, NAPTIP officers, please can you move to the next hall for for an important, where we had the lunch. NAPTIP staff, please can you move to the next hall where we had the lunch for a briefing before you go? Thank you.